Hello, my peeps, and welcome back to Passionate People and Preposterous Peeps. We are ankle deep in season 2. I'm your host, Ike, and before we get too far underway, I'd like to ask you just one question. Do you enjoy this podcast? If so, would you mind doing me a favor and make sure you're subscribed, and then if you still have the energy, if you like or share this podcast, that would be terrific. Now that that's out of the way, may I introduce you to the amazing, nay, radical guest we have today, RANDS!
Hello, Ike. It's good to be here in front of all these lovely people.
Yeah. They get a little rowdy sometimes, perhaps even a little randy when we have a great guest.
Well, I mean, I hope I can stir those sort of feelings within them.
All right. Well, if we're going to stir up some feelings, perhaps we should drop a favorite movie quote.
A favorite movie quote.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there one you like to just pepper in sporadically because it's just too darn fun?
So something that I use in my everyday life.
Everyday life when the opportunity just is right.
Okay, so outside of the expected stuff, one that hits me a lot is I worked many years in retail. So the phrase, and my full name is Randall, so I obviously related to the movie Clerks, and I worked in a video store. So the phrase "I'm not even supposed to be here today" constantly comes out of my mouth.
That is, yeah, that feeling is universal. It is just so poignant. Mm-hmm. Called in or not, it always feels like we're never supposed to be there.
Absolutely. I have my love-hate relationship with Kevin Smith, of course. But yeah, that movie meant a lot to me in those very early years of being a teenager named Randall working in a video store.
Yeah, that's just like too on the nose to not, have it just like be integrated into your life.
Yeah.
Well, since we're on the movie front, what was your first date movie?
First date movie. Oh, it would have been something like some franchise garbage. Possibly the second Pirates of the Caribbean, maybe?
All right.
Because girls like Johnny Depp, I guess. At least at that stage, obviously, we not contemporary Johnny Depp, but 2005 Johnny Depp or whatever it was. Yeah, so that would be my first date movie.
That's a good one. It's a good one.
Is it?
It gets it's a crowd pleaser. It's good in that it's not going to, except to a kind of small divisive crowd, it's not going to be problematic. Mm-hmm. It might not be the best movie, but it's not going to do things that are going to be like really polarize an audience one way or another. It's just kind of, it's like what's that yogurt? Like Danimals or something like that, like the generic like yogurt cups you can get at the store. Mm-hmm. It's not great, but it's still strawberry yogurt. It's pretty darn good. It's not gonna, you're not gonna have people like, frolic in the streets, but you're not gonna have anybody burning somebody's house down. It's a good safe choice.
Well, it is a good, safe choice for most people. But as I mentioned, I worked in a video store at that age. And from that experience, coming out and doing nothing but complaining about plot holes in movies isn't exactly the best way to go on a first date. And I can think of...
So it was divisive for you.
It was divisive for the relationship. You think you're showing off by showing how intelligent you are and how much you could have done the movie better. Oh my God, I don't do date movies anymore. I've been in a relationship for a long time, so it's not something that has to come up anymore. But literally, I can think of 3 examples where I've come out of a movie on a first date and turned around and gone, "That was crap." They've turned around and said, "That was amazing," and it's caused some sort of rift, and you got to spend another hour and a half sort of, massaging that same issue. I mean, Avatar came out, and I definitely didn't have nice things to say about that to the date who was kind enough to join me after she was very radiant about it at the time. I mean, I think I've chilled out a little bit now, but I was a very, very pretentious movie brat back in the dating days.
I mean, if that's what you're about, though, that's like, while it is harsh, it is like not a bad way to curate dates, because it means like if that's what you're about and they need to be on a somewhat similar understanding page, like a trial by fire, right? It's like if this doesn't, if this is so who you are, and like you've made peace with that, and you're just like, yeah, this is who I am. I'm not gonna, this is part of me is never going to change. Not a bad way to figure out if they're going to be kind of down to clown with that aspect of your person. If you're just starting off like hitting the bars that hard, it's like, all right, well, she doesn't care for what Randall's about, and that's fine. Randall's gonna go find another date until he finds one that's accepting of his movie nerddom critiquing.
Yeah, so definitely a hill I've decided that I will not die on anymore if I ever have to date again. Not worth it. Definitely not worth it, because it's more trouble than it's worth for Rands and the other party involved.
Well, when you came out of some of these movies, I'm sure you had some unpleasant things to say. Did you have perhaps a favorite non-traditional curse word that you just tossed in there to give your review extra zest?
I mean, in those specific examples, I can't think of one. But I mean, in general, I mean, I am a absolute lover of old worldy stuff. So things like can't sarn it, or can't sarn it will do.
Can't sarn it?
Yeah, can't sarn it.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Love it. That's great.
Yeah, it's a very old grizzled prospectus type word. You'd see it in like a Gold Rush film or something.
Truly is like, yeah, you'd hear it like Deadwood or something like that for sure.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, is there anyone, talking old worldly, is there anyone who's like that you've never met, alive or dead, that you'd like to have lunch with?
I'd like to have lunch with, alive or dead.
Yeah.
Like a famous figure that I could just literally have lunch with anybody.
Yeah. Any one person. It doesn't matter place or time. You get to like apparate them for a meal or a day and like hang out with them.
Okay, yes, but it's very selfish. Now, I say this as somebody who's entirely agnostic. Possibly atheist, depending on which way you want to go. But the person who is seen as Jesus Christ. Because then you're always the guy who had lunch with Jesus.
Yeah, that's a strong one. Get to ask all the questions. Like how many fish were there really, though? Like,
yeah, and
really,
you figure out.
How big are these bread? Yeah,
exactly. If we didn't have to order wine and the waiter brings around that free water and all of a sudden we have wine, I'm like, all right, maybe I should be a believer.
Cut up afternoon, yeah. Just like getting drunk with Jesus.
Yeah, well, exactly. Or you learn the other way. You're like, well, turn it into wine, and he's like, I'm just a humble carpenter. You're like, well, yeah, we know where this lands.
Yeah.
I feel like that one lunch could sort of splinter an entire new section of the whole Catholic Church.
Where would you take Jesus, do you think? So like a favorite eatery or an eatery that would just like, kind of like test him?
Oh shit. Well, he's strikes me as a bagel guy. So, like, I mean, we probably don't have the same restaurant.
Who isn't a bagel guy, for the record? That's something I heard recently in conversation. Like, oh, that guy looks like he likes bagels. Like, yeah, but like, who doesn't like bagels? Bagels are amazing.
Celiacs, maybe?
Yeah, well, that sucks for them. I'm sorry.
It does, and let's
Mulligan,
hope.
I don't know.
Let's hope Jesus likes his bagels as well.
Yeah.
I mean, King of the Jews and all.
A king should like bagels.
Indeed.
Well, since we're talking about food, if you were a condiment, which do you think you'd be?
A condiment? Like, as in something you can put on food?
Yeah.
Well,
perhaps even a bagel.
Speaking of bagels, I think, what would I be if my personality was synthesized into a condiment? Is a spread a condiment?
Yes. Sure.
Because honestly, I think I want to be like Chipotle Ranch, but I think in reality I'm more of like a low-grade herban cream cheese spread.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I have a spicier personality than maybe I do. I'm a little bit more pedestrian than that,
Yeah, it's one of those things that like you look at yourself and like you envision the way you're envisioning yourself is like, yeah, like this leather. It's like the people that look in the mirror with like wearing a leather jacket. They're like a card, and then you see them walking down the street, and everyone's like, "Who's that nerd?" They have
Precisely.
no idea the way they're being perceived. Yeah.
I fantasize that my condiment label would have 3 chili spices on it, but in reality, it just says keep refrigerated and do not use after 3 days after opening.
Yeah, it's like that's such a great way of putting it. Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of Chipotle ranch and herb cream cheese spice, I'm getting hungry here. What's your favorite meal to just make for yourself, assuming cost and time are not relevant factors?
Cost and time aren't relevant factors. Okay, so because instant noodles, if they were factors, because that's how I live my life. But my absolute favorite meal is okonomiyaki, which is, I don't know. Do you know what that is?
I have no idea. You are speaking French, my friend.
Well, actually, I'm speaking Japanese because it's a Japanese dish. It's like a savory pancake that's on a bed of noodles. It's absolutely
Ooh.
amazing. It has very famous sauce. Like you go to like a Asian grocer or something like that, you'll find like a tube of like. Actually, it's a fantastic condiment. It's like a special sauce that sort of has like it sort of squeezes out like an icing. It's got a little like baby on the packet. It's sort of it's amazing. But okonomiyaki sauce is what I've called that. I don't know what its actual Japanese name is, but okonomiyaki is my answer for sure. I love it.
Have you ever made it before?
Yeah, I've made it before to varying degrees of success. Like I said, it is like it's like a savory pancake that has like vegetables, onions, and like shallots and all that sort of stuff like mixed into it, and then it's on a bed of noodles and egg, and it's absolutely delicious.
Oh, yeah, that sounds amazing.
It is, yeah. It's like you can either get chicken varieties or fish varieties, or in my case, I'm lifelong vegetarian or adult lifelong vegetarian, so tofu.
It still sounds delish. I don't know if you're trying to dissuade me with the tofu, but it's not happening.
Well, like I said, you can get it with chicken, you can get it with beef. It's absolutely delicious. If you ever find yourself at a Japanese restaurant, like an authentic one, definitely have a look or ask about it because it's fantastic.
Is there an inanimate object that you would like to be best friends with, or it's sentient?
Were an inanimate object sentient, is there something I would want to be best friends with? Well, my trading card collection, but that's probably not the thing I would want to be best friends with. In fact, you know what it would be? It would be my soda stream, which is like I don't know if you have that.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you take like carbonated water, you can put in flavors or juices and like kind of create your own like LaCroix, right?
Yeah, so it's basically
LaCroix.
It's like a salsa maker, you know. And you have like a changeable like a canister that has like the carbonation material in it.
It makes that weird farting sound.
Yeah,
you,
exactly.
Like, fill it up. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and then you get water that isn't just water anymore because I'm completely off sodas and stuff like that. You get water that's like a bubbled water for free basically, and it's like a bubble bath for your mouth, I guess.
Wouldn't recommend putting any soap in there, but yeah, other than that,
no. Not unless you've been swearing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean that brings us to a good point. You know, when you swear, you gotta take the soap to the mouth and you learn your lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other life lessons you wished you learned sooner?
Any other life lessons that I wish you'd learned sooner?
Other than swearing in front of your mom, soda's bad for you.
Those are valuable life lessons. I think the main one is, and this was taught to me by Justin Gary, who is a game designer and stuff like that. The idea is simply that even at the highest levels in creative fields, people don't know what they're doing, and that's okay. Everybody's just doing usually the best guesswork they possibly can, especially when it's something that's creative. Obviously, sciences and stuff like that have a finite science, but in fields that might be interesting to people to get involved in creatively, the formula for success, there is none. Everybody's just making best guessworks, and if you could be right down the bottom or right up the top, ultimately your opinion is as good as anybody else's, really.
Fact. Well, that one is such an eye opener too. That's one that I didn't learn till like way later. I always like appealed to authority, looked at people like, well, they know better than I do. It's like they sound like they know better than you do, but they may or may not actually know better than you do.
Well, of course, and culturally, like, we idolize people like that. Like, we idolize people who have had great success, and there are people who are, savants in those things. I don't use the word genius. I don't believe in that word, but it's absolutely amazing. We do idolize them, and there are people who have done the work and can make things better because they've learned more about the science of creating. But at the same time, when you're talking about just a pure creative field, I think it's absolutely important to know that, if you're expressing yourself creatively and you're being true to yourself, that is just as good as somebody who's been doing it for, 20, 50 years or something like that, doing the same thing for themselves. So don't ever be afraid to put your work out there because you feel like it's not as good as other people's, if it's honest to the way you want it to be.
Totally true. I absolutely couldn't agree more. Is there a job, talking about game design, is there a job that at some point in your life you wanted to pursue but are very glad you didn't?
Yes, absolutely. So to pivot away from game design, in fact, because that's a field I'm still exploring, I worked for a couple of years in the film industry in Vancouver, and I have to say that I absolutely thought it would be the dream job when I was able to get involved. I was a PA for a couple of years, and I was an extra for a year-ish. And honestly, I am so glad I didn't fall into that world, because even looking at the people who were in the places I wanted to be in 5, 10, 15 years time, unless you have an above the line position, it honestly, I hate to say it, but it seemed like misery. It seemed like a hustle. It seemed like people were having to basically just, hustle, like, job to job to job, constantly fight over one another, their peers, over the next gig and stuff like that. It was a brutal experience for me, and it's something that made me realize that it wasn't a field that I was interested in exploring.
Yeah. The more I live in Los Angeles, and that's something that I'm looking at going into, and the more I hear about certain positions that I've always been like, oh, I'm interested in that one, I keep getting reminded of why, like, I enjoy and most likely going to stick to writing, is because of, like, there isn't that kind of, you do want to write and turn it in, but there isn't this, like, it's a lot less more involved and has less of that, like, kind of almost like hustle culture of where you're like, there's this constant turnover, there's this constant exhaustion, but you have to, like, push through it, and it just, like, consumes every, ounce of yourself and your time.
Yeah, so, I absolutely agree. Totally. In the sense that, as well, like, it is entirely draining. It is a physical laboring job if you're not, like I said, if you're not on that sort of above the line position, the producer, director, writer, or something like that, and you're one of the tradespeople who are involved. It is an incredibly, and I don't know what the times are like in LA, but in Vancouver it was 15-hour days. You would finish at 3 in the morning, 3 in the morning one day, and then you would be back there by depending on the turnaround and the schedule and stuff like that. I think they were supposed to legally give you 12 hours, but I think once a week or something like that, they could waive that. Sometimes I would leave at 3 o'clock and then be back there at, 7 o'clock the next morning, like literally just completely worn out, completely disenchanted, completely treated like crap, of course, because, in my position, I was at the bottom of the line, but even the people above me were still getting treated like crap by everybody above them. So it seemed like a miserable experience.
To quote a film, not intentionally referring to a film, but to life, but just totally applies, is welcome to the layer cake, son.
Exactly.
It's what that is. You take less crap, but you still take crap. It doesn't matter what position you are until you're at the absolute top. You will always take crap, and it always sucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have a choice. You can always just not eat the cake. Other than... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, and I've decided to politely decline the cake in this particular instance.
Yeah, exactly. I will have delicious tofu instead. Thank you, sir. Well, is there something away from, the film industry that perhaps is like a favorite non-exercise thing that you still have to force yourself to do, but at least at the end of it, you do enjoy the process, or at least the sweat is worth the sweet?
Sorry, a non-what thing? Pardon me?
What's your... sorry, I'll try to be less flowery about it. What's your favorite non-exercise thing that you have to force yourself to do?
Non-physical exercise, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because everybody loves the way exercise makes them feel, but they don't want to do it. So I feel like most people, that would be their answer. So I guess what comes second in line for you behind something that you like have to do, that you enjoy either the experience of it or the end result, but like getting yourself to do it is just like, like running through mud.
Oh, okay, right. So I get it. So you built the exercise contingency into the question to avoid that answer.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Honestly, something that I do regularly that I don't like to, I mean, obviously chores and stuff like that, but I think the most challenging thing for me in an interpersonal sense is going to sleep. Like, I never want to go to bed. Like, I always think that just give me another half an hour. Let's watch another episode. Let's do a little bit more work. Let's do this. I never want to go to bed, although I love sleep. Like, it's absolutely fantastic. Like, I've literally...
You're still at your deepest core, you're still 9 years old. Like,
yeah,
no.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, I mean, there's life is worth living, right? Like, I always...
Exactly.
If I'm awake, I can be proactive. If I'm asleep, I can't be, and that makes me like I will go to sleep, but like those nights where I, in my head I have a mental bedtime of like 10:30, and those nights where I actually meet that, I'm sort of disappointed in myself.
That's awesome. Do you have like a life hack that you'd like to share with the class to improve their daily living? Perhaps how to get to bed on time?
You don't want to get that information from me, obviously, as I just said. Just a general life hack?
Just a general life hack that you think not enough people know about or has been so beneficial to you that just in case anybody out there like yourself has had that issue, they can to improve their life as you have by finding this.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so I don't know how unique this was, but it was unique to me for the 10 years I've been doing it, and then my partner showed me a picture of Oscar Isaacs doing this exact thing on Twitter the other day. So what my life hack is as a gamer, as a long-time gamer, and especially somebody who, and we'll get into this in a moment, but plays a lot of physical games, my life hack is, if you're eating potato chips, corn chips, whatever, and you're playing a game or you're doing something in your life, use chopsticks.
Yep.
Because that way you don't get the crumbs on your hands, you don't get like the stuff on your hands, you can handle things. Chopsticks are the absolute perfect thing for eating snacks in that regard. And that's the life hack that I would go for. I'm not sure, I'm surprised that I don't see more Western people doing that. No Cheeto fingers.
There's ads going on like crazy for these things that you can, it's like, you remember those like training wheel chopsticks that they're connected at the back and the material is like pretty flexible, and so like
they're like springy.
Yeah, they're springy.
Yeah,
they've made those and they're like they're being sold as like gamer assist, like food assists or something like that. I see ads all the time on YouTube because I'm not paid for premium. That's ridiculous. I'll just wait through 5 hours of ads over the course of my week. And they like sit in between the crook of your like thumb and pointer finger, so you can game on like, whatever, like an Xbox. Or no, sorry, they're not between your thumb and your forearm. They're between your ring finger and your middle finger, which you don't really use to hold the controller. And so they can sit there. So you're playing the game, you're playing your Xbox, your PlayStation, and then you take your hand off, grab it and then put it back. But it's just like, it sits there nicely. So you have like full-time access to it. I love it too, because it's the way they're doing it is clearly like they're marketing it as if they invented this object. It's like, no, you just put your name on the side of this thing. Has existed for years. I remember using it when I was 5. They're
exactly.
So proud of themselves. It's great.
I mean, everything is marketing, right? And I'm surprised. Yeah. I'm not surprised, actually. I'm glad to hear that there's a company that's finally caught up with this, because I had no idea. And for years I fantasized. Like I said, I've been doing this since I turned 17. I became very obsessed with Japanese pop culture and stuff like that, so I started using chopsticks almost for as many meals as I possibly could. And the idea that somebody's finally done it and finally marketed it, I do appreciate it. I mean, I had a name for it that I think would be better than whatever the hell they're using, and that was chipsticks. But
oh, nice.
Yeah, but obviously they've beaten me to it, and I was just going to market it in my head as 2 individual sticks. I didn't think about the whole training wheels chopstick thing.
I'm going to give you a theoretical. You're going out to a party and you want to look extra. Other than the normal garb, what accessory do you add to your ensemble to really stand out in a positive way?
I have not done it in years, but again, speaking of that 17-year-old, 18-year-old era, I was convinced that to bring the life of the party to the party,
Hmm.
not only did I need to deliver myself, but I needed to deliver myself in a wide array of hats. And obviously, as we've talked about before, I was well and truly into acting and stuff like that. I literally raided like the theater that I was working with, their like supply closet. So I had everything from like a train conductor's hat to a sailor hat to a classic sort of like Stetson hat, all that sort of stuff. So a hat would be my answer way back when. Nowadays,
Okay.
and then I went into like a bow tie phase, but well and truly got out of that. Nowadays, I don't care to accent anything, but yeah, hat or bow tie were certainly in the past my go-to like life of the party accessories.
Love it. As a man with as many hats as there are weeks in the year, I very much respect that answer and appreciate it.
52 hats, that's a lot of hats.
Yeah, I may or may not have an addiction.
Are we talking like baseball caps? Are we talking like
Baseball caps specifically? There's this brand put out by the people that make them is New Era, but it's this brand called Tokidoki. I believe it's actually based here in Los Angeles, but I don't know. You all out there can look them up. It's very kind of unique, almost like chibi-esque, like character creation. They did a lot of Marvel, and they have their own kind of characters. And it's really fun. And I got into it in like the mid 2010s. Kind of didn't really look back. I get that, or I get another really fun one is farm league teams here in the United States for like baseball, because their mascots are bananas, because there's nobody like really they don't have any like that, they're not on TV or anything like that, so they don't need that much oversight on like design, and so the things that they make are just crazy. It's not in like a like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's on a hat, but it's just like very quirky and cute, but just like it would never be a mainstream mascot because it's not tough enough. It's a farm league, like so much of the people coming there are kind of invested in the team as opposed to like needing to think they look cool to root for them or something like that, or at least that's my spin on it. So that like those two are like my big time collections.
Dude, you gotta sort your lids. I love it.
Speaking of lids and other, plebeian fun bits, what poor man luxury do you still enjoy to this day?
Did you say poor man luxury?
Yes.
Like what's a poor man luxury?
The go-to example is like Kraft macaroni and cheese, or Top Ramen or something like that. That
right.
when you were kind of living paycheck to paycheck, you would somewhere between treat yourself and just appreciate this dollar object that you could really just enjoy, even though your life wasn't financially in the greatest circumstance.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, I get it. And I'm gonna have to throw to our conversation before about snacks. Bugles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the nacho
Love
cheese
me a
bugles.
bugle.
Yeah, those weird like fingers and stuff. And we don't have like, I grew up in Australia. We didn't have them. They're only a new thing in my life, so I fucking love them. And they're always at the dollar store here in Canada.
Oh, righteous. Here's the combo. They've done it once because the same company owns these, but you can do this yourself, and I highly recommend it to you and all listeners out there. Is you go and get you can get spicy or normal Cheez-Its, or I guess the white cheddar would work too. Either way, you get a thing of Cheez-Its and you get a thing of the caramel bugles. You put them in a bag and mix them up.
Whoa!
They had them as.
Whoa! Can we just jump on something? There's caramel bugles now.
Yeah.
Like
It's
sweet
always been
caramel
bugles, my friend. Yeah.
This is. I mean, America has a lot of problems, but if it's got caramel bugles, I mean, I'm gonna have to check this out.
Oh, they're the best.
Oh, okay.
And putting caramel with savory cheese is just.
I've only ever seen like savory ones, like we're talking about the same thing, like the little like witches' hats for your fingers thing. Yeah. Wow, I did not know that they came in varieties outside of nacho and original. Like I said, they haven't been in my life that long. Ever since I moved to Canada, so like 6 years or whatever.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I'm getting to introduce you to the greatness that is caramel bugles.
Oh, damn it. That is definitely going to be the first thing I Google when I get off this call. And just see what the import fees to Canada are.
My heart is full.
Yeah.
No, but they did. It's the same company, and I only know this because at our. I don't know if you have 7-Elevens up in Canada, but
Yeah.
down in the States, yeah,
Actually,
they
good
have
question.
duos is what they were marketing, and they still. I think they still have them, but I think it was last year, early in the year, like maybe even late last year, but definitely early in the year, like talking like February, March, 2021, they had duos that were those two mixed in a bag. And I think I'd had them before, but it was really cool to see corporate kind of getting on, like realizing the awesomeness that I too had. And like just I think I probably bought 40 bags of those
Oh,
or
wow.
something outrageous.
Yeah,
Oh, could
yeah,
not
you
get
get that
enough.
like limited edition panic. You're like, oh, it's at the
Yeah,
store this
exactly.
week.
They're
I'll
gonna
go
take
back
it away
next
any day
week.
now.
And then you're like, and then you notice they're not restocking the display, and you're like, shit, I gotta start grabbing all this stuff.
I literally, for 2 weeks in a row, I should feel bad. I don't. But I should feel bad because I went into the 7-Eleven that was down the street from my folks' place, and I took every single one of them off the line and bought them every time I went in. It was just like around 10 or something like that. Just these little bags, just walked up, just poof.
Amazing.
Hey man, I'm committed to the bit. All
Gotta commit
right.
to the bit.
Well, we were talking as somebody who's worked in the film industry. If they made a movie of your life, who would you want to play you in said movie? You can pick the time period and the time period of the person playing you.
Oh shit! So they don't even have to be a contemporary actor.
No.
Oh damn. You know what? There is a million answers right there. Anthony Perkins comes to mind, but I think my actual answer would be Daniel Radcliffe for me.
Okay.
Just because I think he suits type, and if you can play Weird Al, you got my respect.
Fact.
And not the other. Who cares about that wizard crap? Weird Al's the real magic there.
A real
Um,
tour de force. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but I am assuming it's going to be. And in the time period, I did like a van life thing in the States for 6 months. I think that would have been interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I went
What?
pretty much
What?
everywhere, met a lot of people. I think that could be a really cool Daniel Radcliffe on the road, in the van. Like, I mean, it markets itself.
Daniel Radcliffe is Rand in a van.
Rands in a van. Yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it right there. In vans. It's Rands in a van, in vans. And I'm wearing, like, wearing van shit.
Yeah. So what? Let's take a little. Let's take a little. Take a turn off at the next opportunity here. What? What had you coming into the States? Van lifing it for 6 months. How did that come about?
It was, well, I got disillusioned. Like I was talking, this podcast I think is incidentally being like a mini biography, but I got disillusioned with the film industry in Vancouver. That's what I thought I wanted to do. It was part of why I wanted to move to Canada in the first place. I got super disillusioned, and we had lived in Vancouver longer than we wanted to, with me and my partner. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like we had originally moved to Canada to do like a 2-year working visa, do farm stays and all that sort of stuff. And that didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen. We ended up moving in with some people, and unfortunately, well, not moving in with some people. We moved into a basement suite. They lived above us. Their marriage fell apart while we were living under them, and so that one of
Oh
the
no.
people who, yeah, it was unfortunate, but one of the people, the husband of the relationship, he was basically left with the kids while the wife disappeared, and we moved upstairs and lived with him while we put all our plans on hold so that he could sort of get his life back together, and he had like a sort of a
Aw.
family unit. And we basically did that over 2017, 2018, and then when 2019 hit, we were like, right, it's our time to sort of enjoy this. And by that stage, we'd applied for permanent residency in Canada, and all that sort of stuff happened. So it was like, well, we're going to live in Canada for the rest of our lives. We always wanted to do a van trip. We just hit the road in the States, and we did like probably 30-something thousand kilometers, which I guess is, I don't know,
Wow.
20,000 miles, I guess. I don't know what that translates
Yeah,
to American
it's a
miles.
lot of. Either way, it's a ways. What
Mm.
what places did you hit any major areas, major cities? Have any like great highlights, lowlights?
Oh, we went everywhere, like everywhere except the Midwest, and that was intentional because we're like, we'll do the Midwest in a separate thing when we live in Canada. But then we moved to where I live now, in Canada, and unfortunately, COVID hit as we were planning our next sort of part 2 of that trip, so we've never actually done it now. So yeah, everywhere. We started from Vancouver, so we went all the way down the coast, right down to San Diego, and then out to Palm Springs, out to Nevada. We went everywhere basically, except for like Chicago, Wisconsin, Michigan, like that sort of central Midwest area. We sort of missed, but otherwise we hit every other major city along the coasts and stuff like that.
Any favorite cities? Any favorite stories?
Oh shit! I mean, there's a million. Like we don't have time to go into it now, I'm sure, because otherwise this podcast is going to be 3 hours long. But we met somebody at the California sign who we ended up, doing the whole like, oh, we're taking a picture of us. Do you want us to take a picture of you? That whole thing. Got talking, made a really good lifelong friend. Turns out that he is a foot fetish photographer. And photography he had a really good camera, so that's why we got talking. And then he's like, well, I was like, what do you do? And he was really cagey about it. Turned out he was a foot fetish photographer. Good on him. Good hustle if you can do it.
Yeah.
And then we did my girlfriend just decided, hey, I never do anything crazy. I'm going to do he's like, he jokingly said, I could shoot your feet. She's like, let's go for it. Like she never did, we were on the road. We were sort of a couple of weeks in. So she got like glamour shots of her feet taken and stuff like that. It's not our bag, but he put it up on his Instagram and it got a bunch of attention and stuff like that. That's just one of the many sort of things you do with meeting people. We met somebody else in a caravan park, not even a caravan park, unused carnival grounds in Eureka. I'm sure you know where Eureka is if you're from California.
Eureka, California. Yeah, I used to live up in Humboldt County.
Yeah, absolutely. So we met somebody there, and then we ended up talking to them, and it turns out that they were like a wildlife savant who lived at Yellowstone. So we got a full exploration, all sorts of things. We got an exploration of Yellowstone, watched the buffaloes from afar, doing their like mating season thing, get to watch like a buffalo funeral. It was an amazing time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there...
Sorry, go on.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, as for favorite city, I mean, obviously I love all the major ones. I hadn't been to New York before. That was very exciting. But one that really struck me, and it's very much because it was very, very similar to where I grew up in Australia, because it's on the coast, was of all places, and I wish it wasn't in the state that it's in, but Tampa, Florida. I really fell in love with Tampa. I think it was a beautiful city. It's unfortunate that state is in the condition that it's in politically, because I would move there in an instant if they could sort of like, give that its own nation state or something like that. I love that city.
What about worse? Is there a place that, as Jim Hawkins says, wild horses would have to drag him back there?
No, not particularly. There was definitely some areas that I felt unsafe in, but like why name and shame, right? Like every place you have, sometimes part of the charm is the terribleness of it, right? Like sometimes it's just like, oh, we're gonna go here because it is so, so god awful, right? Like I don't have anywhere that I would say that I would never return to.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad my country has not put you off returning.
Not geographically, anyway.
All right. Is there any media, whether it be books, graphic novel, TV show, or movie that you've been putting off that's next on your to consume list that you just can't wait to break open?
Oh shit! All media. I'm so far behind on everything. We were talking before the mics came on about Sandman. I watched like 2 episodes of that. Didn't really hit me, but I haven't watched any of it. I haven't watched any of the most recent Marvel movies. This year has been a real black hole for me in popular culture. I guess if you want me to narrow down some one thing, I mentioned that, and again, we're going to get into it later, but I mentioned how much I love tabletop games, and I'm halfway through it, and I need to get back to finishing it. But there's this book I'm reading. It's called 7 Games, and it's basically a 7 games : a human history. And it's these human stories about these 7 games. So the 7 most influential tabletop games in human history. So chess, checkers, poker, and the list goes on. Go, backgammon, all that sort of stuff.
Sweet. That is really cool. It's just like the impact on human history, where they came from, like how they've influenced cultures and such like that.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm halfway through it. So I've read chess, checkers, backgammon, and Go. So all basically black and white board games. Like basically, like, with a board and pieces, and you place the pieces on the board and stuff like that. And essentially the idea is, yes, there's this, like, it's basically like 7 really long articles. And one of them, it starts out, basically tells you the whole history of sort of where the game came from. And a lot of these games are just like antiquity, right? Like there's no way of knowing where they came from. And ultimately, it tells you that story, and then it introduces you to a story about a human in relation to their story with that game. So in one of the examples, we join, actually, is a controversial figure at the moment, but we join one of chess's greatest players, and he sort of talks about playing chess. And then and then at the time we talk about I can't remember his name, Narevov or something like that, the Russian grand chess master in the 90s, who was the first person to ever be beaten by a computer at chess. It's this really fascinating story about how human culture and history has evolved around these games, and then they intertwine with these interpersonal stories. It's really good. It's by a political author who has just decided to do this as a side project. I strongly recommend it. 7 games by, can't remember their name, but I'm sure they can look it up. Anthony somebody.
I think it's Oliver Roeder.
Oliver Roeder, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. The chess player you're thinking of, I think, is Gary Kasparov. Is that about right?
Yeah, he's a controversy right now, I believe, because he is...
Yeah, but I was just making sure I was thinking of the right one.
Oh no, Kasparov is the guy who got beaten by Deep Blue, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy who got beaten by Deep Blue.
Yeah. So he's not controversial. Yeah. No, there is a discussion with when the book was written, the world champion. And he's currently the one who's accusing the other guy of cheating at the moment. I'm not really in that world, so I don't know, but there's controversy.
Yeah. Well, they can have it.
Yeah.
It's due for a little something. Yeah, it needs a little zest. Let him have it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well... All right. Well, lastly, before we throw it to commercial break, if you could have listeners of this podcast hear one song of your choosing, which would it be?
Oh man, like you did ask me this before we started, and this is a really hard choice, because I think the way you phrase the question is, if you could have the listeners of this podcast hear a song, what would it be? And my song could be many multitudes of things. There was things from bands like Sparks and things from bands like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and all that sort of stuff. But what I want the listeners to hear is, because it's such an icon of popular culture, and if you've never heard it, go listen to it or any other songs he's done. But William Shatner, Kirk from Star Trek, has released a number of cover albums where he does spoken word versions of major pop songs. And the one that I want to insist people go listen to is Common People, which is a song by Pulp, very famous British sort of party band rock song. Just go listen to him do it, because he reads every line of the song as if he's auditioning for a play. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Like he throws it and hams it to the absolute wall in the only way that the original Captain Kirk can.
Right on. All right, with that, we're going to throw it to our first break. Feel free to stick around and enjoy the totally real commercial, or take a minute to enjoy Common People by William Shatner. Or if you really wanted to hear a song from a previous episode, check out the playlist on Spotify, Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast, Song Rex. That's a long title, I know.
Don't worry, there's a link in the description.
Either way, see you in a jiffy. Do you need 100 pounds of butter? Come on down to Company Street Company.
What if I need 30 gallons of olive oil?
Come on down to Company Street Company. But what if I just want one flatless bird roasted for a reasonable price? Come on down to Company Street Company.
Okay, but...
Just come on down to Company Street Company. We have everything for a better price, free snacks, and employees who don't want to kill themselves, or you, because we treat them like fucking human beings. Yeah, but... Yup.
Even...
Just get your ass down to Company Street Company, where the only sketchy thing we've ever done is enable frozen orange juice hoarders. Welcome back, everyone. So, Rand, what's the passion that you've brought today to speak about, perhaps even passionately?
So my passion, we talked about a ton of things that I wanted to do, and I have alluded to it a little bit. I am absolutely have had a lifelong obsession with physical tabletop games. I cannot express how valuable that is. I always thought that my art form of choice was film. And as we discussed before, my art form, I bounced off my art form. I tried to make it. I tried to get involved in it. I really wanted to be involved in it. And then at one point during the aforementioned sort of van life trip, I was like, what's been in my life? What is the one constant in my life that I've always loved? I felt disillusioned by the fact that film wasn't the answer for me. So I bounced off that, and ultimately, all of a sudden it hit me like a eureka moment, not Eureka, California, a eureka moment. Was
a eureka bathtub moment.
Yeah, exactly. It was tabletop games. I love so much about it. I love the puzzles that they create. I love the social engagement that they make. And honestly, I can be losing at a tabletop game, and as long as I'm at the table and somebody else is winning, I am usually having the time of my life just by playing it.
Awesome.
Which is something I can't say about almost any other activity.
Yeah, and a lot of other people too. That is definitely like the sign of true bliss, is when you're able to, regardless of what's happening, you still find joy in that moment. That truly is a gift from, theoretical on high. That's so awesome.
Absolutely.
When did you first experience like tabletop games? Do you remember the introduction, like the first one that comes to mind that was your introduction to tabletop games?
Absolutely. So working definition here, tabletop games, obviously, any game that you can play on a table. So that can include anything from, Snap when you're a kid, to Monopoly, to Risk, to Yahtzee, to any manner of any sort of physical game. And the reason we call them tabletop games nowadays is obviously because you have video games nowadays and other sorts of parlor games and all sorts of stuff. And I remember, I was very fortunate to grow up on a big farm property, and 2-story house, tons of rooms and stuff like that. Again, very fortunate. And ultimately, there was a special place in my house. Like, I had my own room, I had my own toy chest, but outside of all of that, there was a very special place, and that was the bottom of the linen closet. And the reason that area in my house, it was the top of a staircase, was so special. I think I told this on another podcast, but the area that was so special for me was because at the bottom of the linen closet, underneath all the Manchester, underneath all the, the blankets and everything like that, was our stack of household board games. And nothing brought me more joy than opening that cupboard, pulling out all the pieces, even if I had nobody to play with, and just sort of looking at them. And we're talking about the basic of basic shit. Like, it's not like my family was into really cool stuff, but it was like Clue, old copies of Clue from 1970, Monopoly from literally I think the 50s was our copy, Yahtzee, Pass the Pigs, like all those things that you would see at like a basic...
Pass the Pigs!
Yeah, all those things you would see at like a basic Toys R Us level circa 1987. That's the sort of stuff I'd be talking about, and just I was so entranced by the fact that you could do these things, and I would bug my sisters to play. Eventually, my sisters moved out of the house, and because they're much older, and then I'd bug my parents to play, and they never wanted to play. But I would, in the parlance for something that we're both very familiar with, I would goldfish with myself these games.
Goldfishing, for those of you that don't know, is when you play by yourself with no restrictions, generally speaking. So if you were gonna goldfish a game of Speed or something like that, you would just be playing as one player, as if your opponent either already lost or didn't want to have any of it, and so you're just going at as quickly as you can or as thoroughly as you can to kind of win just when playing against no opposition.
Absolutely. So in my specific example there, I would get out the Monopoly board, roll the die, and just move along and be like, all right, I'll buy this place this turn, roll the dice again for myself, and nobody would pay me any money. I wouldn't be losing, but I'd just be putting the houses on the thing. It would absolutely enrapture my imagination.
That actually kind of gets to be like a harder game if you play it by yourself, because you have no, other than pass and go, you have no monetary ingress.
Absolutely.
And you have potential of renting on community chest, or no, what?
Community chest
is the one that's positive. What's the one that's negative? Yeah, isn't there one that's negative? It's income tax or something, right?
There is definitely one of the chance cards or something like that, where it's you've got to pay income tax, lose $10 or something like that. $10 for income tax. Fucking, this game was made in 1927.
So Well, do you remember the first one that really was, or did you have like a favorite of like Monopoly, all of those games?
So ultimately, I see my experience in two different eras. So we talked about that one before, where it is that classical, to borrow the phrase I used before, that Toys R Us aisle sort of mass market game. However, when I was growing up, there was a chain of like secondhand sort of, I guess what North America would call pawn stores, like, selling, reselling, that sort of stuff, like, PAWN stores.
Oh,
Near
sorry.
my
Yeah,
near
that
my
makes
house.
more sense.
Yeah. And
I heard porn stores and I was like, what games are we buying?
that's you roll those two dice and it tells you where to nibble and when. That's a different game altogether. And you do not want to see the accessories that come with that game. You don't want to back that Kickstarter too hard. I digress. There was a bunch of stores that were secondhand stores, and and there was one really close to my house, and that's where, like, for me as a poor kid who literally had to save their lunch money for the end of the week, so that like I would starve myself throughout the week so that I could go and buy stuff from this store when I told my parents that I was actually buying stuff at the cafeteria, which is terrible to do. That's why I was a thin kid. And ultimately what I would end up doing is I would go down to this store once a week and I'd spend, $3 or $4 or $5 or whatever I could on this sort of secondhand thing, most often a board game. And the one that really revolutionized it for me, and a lot of people will probably be familiar with it now because it's just been re-released, was called Hero Quest. And essentially what that was, it was a game by Games Workshop, who makes Warhammer figurines, like little battling war game figurines. But it was basically it was Warhammer meets D&D. It sort of had like this immersive fantasy feel, and you'd go on a dungeon crawling adventure, and you'd set up, one person would play essentially the dungeon master role and set up the board, and then everybody else would play it. And that was sort of my first introduction into, what we would consider nowadays as hobby board games, sort of more immersive, more complex, more strategic board games, was Hero Quest.
Right on. So you're playing Hero Quest. Also, but brief break from like the main thing. I totally understand where you're coming from. When I was in my freshman year, I was a band geek, and we had band camp that was located at the high school, and I was given an allowance for food because you had to buy lunch every day on this like tiny little lunch break we had. And instead of doing that, I went to a local hobby shop. Sorry for lying to you, Mom. And bought a bag of chips for $1 and took the other 5 and bought like repacks that somebody was selling, which I was assured there was great cards in there, which there weren't. But, got like 80 cards for like $4 and a bag of chips, and then went back and marched out in the Nevada, 90 to 100 degree heat, hefting around a sousaphone. So 100% know where you're coming from.
Oh man, it's so relatable, right? And like essentially, I just viewed it as my per diem, right? It's like, all right, I'm here. This is my allowance for being out in the world today. If I don't want to eat, I don't have to. And more often than not, I'd go to a friend's house or something like that after school, like on the walk home, and they would have like their mum baked cookies and shit. So I'd just be like, all right, I'll eat there. Like it was so like the video game, to the point where I was literally starving myself to play these games and get these new games. That's where it was. And I think, the zenith of that, I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but the zenith of that was saving up, 10 days worth of lunch money to get like the ultimate chase card for my Yu-Gi-Oh deck at 1 year. At that time, was the sort of the big game that all the kids were playing. And it was like a, $55 card. My parents would have hung me from a eucalyptus tree in Australia if they found out I'd spent that much money on a single piece of cardboard. But, nowadays that doesn't seem too bad.
So you find out about board gaming, you start goldfishing because nobody will play with you. How old are we at this point? We're like 8, 6, something like that?
Well, for the more traditional, like I said, that mass market stuff, for sure. Like that excitement, that joy. Like I remember I used to just carry around a 6-sided die and roll it for fun. Just because it took me back to playing those games, right? And people would play with. Oh,
that's so pure.
Yeah, it was basically, you see those kids nowadays who are doing their like, just basically fidget cubing, but like without any of the fidget sort of sense of it. It's just like, all right, I got a 6 this time. Let's see if I can get a 6 again in a row and all that sort of stuff. But the question was, when did I?
So you first, I was just checking for clarity. You got into like board games when you're like, grade school level.
Oh, absolutely. Like
Okay.
I remember lying to my friends that I had to go home early because my parents were mean or something like that.
Yeah.
Play like from a play date type thing. And really the reality was I went home and then forced my mother to play Monopoly with me while she cooked dinner.
No, no, you didn't want to play it with your friends?
Well, at that stage, you know, his Monopoly's pretty lame at that point, right? Like, so, and they would have to
Oh,
come to
okay.
my house. There was some politics in that and all that sort of thing. So I was like, oh, I gotta go home
Okay.
early. My mum wants me home early for dinner. And the reality was, I was going home, she'd be making dinner, and I'd be forcing her to roll her die every second turn. And at this stage, I'm like 7, maybe?
Awesome. So you do that. When do you get into the collectible card games?
Okay, so for those who don't know, my big passion is collectible card games, which is basically, or trading card games as they're also called nowadays, which is also games like Magic the Gathering. I mentioned it before, Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon is probably the biggest example of this in the world. It's a card game where you play a game from a set of cards that you get from a randomized pack. Essentially loot boxes before we had digital games. So when did I get into that? Pokemon was the gateway drug there, because that came out in.
Damn, you need that Pikachu.
Honestly, I was the biggest Pokemon fan as a kid, like age 8. So what are we talking? 90. I think Pokemon, the trading card game, launched in 1999. So that entire year I was consumed with that game. But just as a tangent, I was the biggest Pokemon fan. I could name every level that every Pokemon evolved at, blah, 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 that sort of garbage.
Nice.
But having said that, my least favorite thing in all of Pokemon was Pikachu.
That's kind of like the I'm trying to think of a good parallel to that, but that is like very much one of those like
It's like,
outsider
I love football,
versus insider kind of
Tom
thing.
Brady's a piece of garbage.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like a good example of that, but that is such an interesting through line for a lot of like of how you can tell if somebody's like, and I don't mean this with there's no condemnation with this,
None taken.
but the difference between of an inside fan and an outside fan, you have people that are like kind of like passive fans. They do this like casually, you know, like, oh, I like Pikachu, she's really cute, or, you know, I like mice, or yellow's my favorite color, whatever. That's completely valid. But then you have the people, or like they watch the show and they think Pikachu's just like the most powerful thing ever. And then you get like in kind of the inner sanctum, and it's just like somewhere between all of the other people thinking it's the best and it just not being the reality, there is this usually like opposite reaction from like the inside crowd. I guess, and this is not going to translate well for the audience, so sorry about that. But for like Magic players, it's kind of like elves being great versus not. Like a lot of people like elves, or like this, you know, these tribes.
I think dragons is probably the
outside.
best example of that in Magic.
Dragons is probably way the best example, where it's like, oh, I love them, they're so cool, they're so powerful, and then you get inside and save Brian Kibler. Nobody has played dragons to pretty much any success for the large quantity of Magic's existence. And I'm trying to think of other ones, but I'm not, you know, super into things. I guess it'd probably maybe something about baseball, like home runs versus getting like getting a double or getting a triple. Like home runs are cool, but getting a triple is way more impressive, usually because it requires either fumbling on their part or the runner being excessively good at running. And so that might be one of those where it's like from the outside, like home runs are dope, and they are great, but also it's like kind of vanilla awesomeness. Just like, yeah, they hit the ball over the fence, woo, like it takes skill, but also not that much. You know, it's a lot of variance where like getting a triple is like impressive for a different reason.
Well, I mean, for my take, obviously, I'm not, again, I watch a game of baseball. I have no idea what the hell's going on because I didn't grow up in baseball countries. But for my take, UFC, it's like if I ask somebody who their favorite UFC fighter is, and they say Conor McGregor, who is just like, you know, he's a poster boy for the game, but he's not really the best fighter in any capacity. No. I just roll my eyes, right? I'm like, all right, okay, you're a fly-by-night fan, but that's not about judgment. Like, I never judged anybody else for liking Pikachu or anything like that. The interesting story there is my sister, again, as I mentioned, was much older, did an exchange year in Japan over 96 and 97, did like a gap year. And she sent back these presents, and 96 and 97 is when Pokemon hit in Japan, well before the cartoon came out. And she had
Oh, wow.
sent me a bunch of Pokemon souvenirs, but it was 2 years before it came out in America. So I had all these like Japanese things, and I just thought they were like little Japanese mascots or whatever. And the one thing she sent to me, and she told me the story when she came back, she said and this might have been the entire reason I had this opinion. She went into a Japanese store and had her friend translate. She was like, well, what's the most popular one of these new Pokemon things? I want to get it for my friend, for my brother. And ultimately they said Pikachu, but we were all sold out of Pikachu, of course, because it was year one of Pokemon Mania. So they gave her a Raichu, and she sent that back. So to me, my first ever experience with Pokemon was this little plastic figurine of a mouse thing. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I have no idea what this is.
Yeah.
Like, I had no context for it. And I literally threw it in the back of a toy chest and didn't think about it. But I always thought it was cool, right? Like, I always thought it looked really cool and stuff. And then a year or two later, Pokemon hits. And I was like, I know what this is. This is that thing that my sister Melina had sent me from Japan. And I ripped open, like, I tore apart my room, found this toy, and I was the coolest kid because I had the toys before they come out of the store. Anyway, so we're digressing. Now my passion is Pokemon. Let me just put this down here. I have no idea what's happening in the world of Pokemon nowadays. I have been so far disengaged from that particular franchise for a long time, except for the card game, which I'm involved in for various reasons. But yeah, that is not my passion. My passion is tabletop games. But Pokemon was the gateway.
Yeah. So we do Pokemon. You're still like grade school or like, like late, like early teens or something like that. It sounds like, am I getting about right?
Not even 9, 8 or 9,
okay,
maybe
9. Okay.
10.
So
at the oldest.
You go into Pokemon, that eventually translates to Yu-Gi-Oh, which eventually translates to Magic. Am I guesstimating correctly here?
It's a little anfractious, but Pokemon comes out. And again, the subsection of, the big header under my love of tabletop games is collectible games. That's really where I've niched myself. So we talked about how Pokemon got me into it, and it actually introduced me to what people in the competitive collectible card game or trading card game world call organized play. So ultimately, at the age of 9, Toys R Us in Australia, and I'm pretty sure they did it in North America as well, had like organized play days, and they were sort of like competitive, but they weren't really. Like, you'd have to beat like the older kid, which was basically just like some Toys R Us employee who didn't give a crap, and you would sort of understand going like on a Saturday and stuff like that. And then from there it grew. So there was Pokemon, and then before that after Pokemon came out, collectible card game manufacturers or publishers who were making games like Magic realized, there was this big world of kids that we hadn't tapped into, because previously Magic had come out, gamer type games like Magic and vampire themes and fantasy themes were big. All of a sudden they started licensing them based on Japanese properties. So from Pokemon, I went from Pokemon to Dragon Ball Z trading card game or collectible card game it was called officially, to Sailor Moon, to another couple like Neopets and Magination. Yu-Gi-Oh comes along, and in this entire time there is this undercurrent of Magic the Gathering as well. My friends are starting to get a little curious about it. I haven't even talked about my first experience with Magic the Gathering, but a lot of that sort of stuff is convoluting into being a really major sort of influence in my life, and it's sort of because it solved the problem that I had with those board games. It was like when I was essentially almost an only child. Like we mentioned my sisters, but they were moved out of my house by the time I was 8 years old. So ultimately what it would be is through that organized play, which is like sort of, going to a store and playing other people who enjoy the same passion, it opened up this door for me. It opened up a whole window of the opportunity of like, right, I don't need to worry about organizing other people to play the game I want to play. I can play the game and craft it however I want to, and then go to somewhere where there's already people expecting to play that specific game.
That's so cool. Yeah, like it frees up that, that responsibility and that awkwardness of like, I don't want to be that guy. Now you just get to go be that guy, free of that pretense of that like yoke, right? Yeah. You're no longer bound or like weighed down at the possibility of like having to infringe or enforce. Instead, that somebody else is responsibility, and you just get to have the fun of the whole entire purpose of it.
Well, I'm sure a lot of the listeners will relate, and this circles back away from the collectible card game thing, but to like just the regular tabletop game thing. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have had game nights, whether that's a game night that they've organized, whether that's one that they've gone to a friend's house of, or something like that. And there's always that guilt of like, oh, I want to be the person to play Ticket to Ride. That's the game I want to play. And you put it out on the table, everybody plays it. If there's not some specific game you're all gathering to play, you do feel that innate guilt of like, oh, if I win, it's like, okay, well, you chose this game. If nobody else is having a good time, it's ultimately like, oh, I chose this game. I'm responsible for the social engagement around it. Again, it is awkward, but also fascinating an experience.
So awesome. So you do that. So what was you said there was a story for like when you first got introduced to Magic.
So Magic the Gathering is something that I've always had a love-hate relationship with. I have gone through periods in my life where I love it. I've gone through periods in my life where I hate it. I've gone through periods in my life where I've never had an opinion outside of those two things. But the genesis for my experience with Magic the Gathering, and this is going to probably resonate with only the Magic the Gathering sort of fans in the audience. And I'm sorry, but I'll try and bring everybody else along as best I can. Ultimately, what happened is I, at the age of 4, 5, in Australia, was growing up, and at that point we had a really strong relationship with my cousin, who was basically a teenager. He was close to my sister's ages, so I would be there almost every weekend or every other weekend. I learned Sega from him. I learned how to play Sega, or whatever, how you say in North America, like Sonic the Hedgehog type stuff and all those sort of games.
Yeah.
And one day he pulls me into his bedroom, closes the door, and his mother was a little bit, not Puritan, but a little bit like conservative in that sense. She definitely wasn't religious or anything like that. He's like, hey, Rands, come here, have a look what I got. And he shows me this pile of cards. And the pile of cards that he shows me are revised Magic cards. And he flips through them, and he's showing me them. And I honestly, and for those who aren't familiar with Magic, there's 5 different colors of Magic. There's earth, and there's green, and then there's red, and there's blue, and there's white, and then there's of course black. And black represents like death and decay and all that sort of stuff. And in the 90s, Magic was very much, as I mentioned before, aimed at college students. So the art was so visceral, so edgy. And for a little 5-year-old mind, the art, especially the black cards, really warped me, scared me to the point where I didn't want anything to do with them. Absolutely terrified me. So I mean, there was cards like Dredge Skeletons and cards like, like Anson Maddox art and stuff like that. Art that a normal 5-year-old normally wouldn't be exposed to, because it was horrific, literally and figuratively horrific art. So he showed me these cards, and I was like, I don't think I like this. The door was closed. We knew we were doing something sketchy, because his mother was, like I said, not really into the whole magic of it all. It wasn't quite Satanic Panic, but it was in that ilk. It didn't feel wholesome or whatever. And that my aunt, obviously. And so he showed me these cards, and he's like, well, what do you think? Do you think this is really cool? And he showed me, ultimately, I don't really remember the experience that well, but he ultimately showed me sort of like what you would do to play. He would goldfish to show me how it was, because he only had his deck. And he handed me his deck, and he's like, just don't tell anyone, but you can take any of the land cards in there if you really like it. Because he's like, do you like this? And I said, I like them all except for the black ones. Like the evil monster ones and stuff like that. Again, we're talking, I'm literally 4 or 5 years old at this point. And ultimately what ends up happening is I go through all his cards, and he's like, you can take any of the land cards, they're easy to replace. Not remembering that what he had in his deck was called a dual land, which is like two of it's like a super rare card, and ultimately it gives you twice as good as any sort of common normal land. It was really desirable, and I really latched onto, I think it was a tropical island. I'm almost 100% sure it was a tropical island, which is like the tracks. Red, like the blue and green card.
Blue green, yeah.
And I was obsessed with it. I'm like, this one looks so cool. Specifically, the reason I remember saying it was so cool is, for those who are familiar with early Magic, it had a really unique text box that had like a concentric circle sort of pattern to it. And I was like, this is the only one I want. I want this one. I want this one and this one. Will you give me this one? And he said, no, I don't want to give you that one. And I started to cry. And I think because I started to cry, He didn't want his mother to be alerted, so he was like, all right, just take it, you little brat. And ultimately, my first ever Magic card I had was a bunch of other, like, islands and whatever, bunch of other common lands, and then that one tropical island, for some reason I loved because of the text box. That's my story with Magic, and it took me until after Pokemon 5, 6, 7 years later, when I was trying to coerce my friends into playing these other games, like I mentioned, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon. Once we sort of fell off Pokemon and we were bouncing around, they sort of gravitated towards Magic, and because of my previous experience, I didn't want to go to Magic. I was like, it still had that sort of like horror, clown at a circus feeling in the back of my childhood head. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And ultimately, Yu-Gi-Oh comes along. I do try Magic a little bit here and there, but I didn't feel really good about it at that time. And this is like 2000-ish. So I think Onslaught Block or something. Onslaught Block, I think. Around about that time.
Yeah, Onslaught or Odyssey, I think. About
yeah,
that.
I think Odyssey was that later. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Yeah, so around about that block. Anyway, so I did play it a little bit then. I had like starter cards and starter deck stuff like that. And then I've obviously become obsessed with it because it is the progenitor of the genre of gaming that I am absolutely in love with, which we've spent the last sort of, I don't know, whatever it's been, 10 minutes talking about or whatever.
That's so cool. Thank you for walking us through that. That's awesome. So you go from Magic. When do you play, or do you enjoy like the big sprawling games that are like also considered like it? When you say tabletop games, I feel like a lot of people expect the kind of sprawling in a box like Arkham Asylum or something like that. I think that's right. Or
yeah, I mean Arkham Asylum is a comic book, if that's what you're talking about.
No, I'm not thinking of Arkham Asylum. What am I thinking of? I don't know.
Oh no, Arkham Asylum I think is it is the Crypto's the H.P. Lovecraft card game.
Yeah. So
Arkham
like
Horror is what you're thinking of.
Arkham Horror, thank you. God,
yeah, sorry.
I clearly don't play many like big board games, but are there any as a lover of tabletop, when or did you get into any like big board games, like kind of like party board games of that variety?
Okay, so really interesting choice of words there, because party means something completely opposite to that in the board game space. So obviously the first big board...
okay. Please inform me.
Yeah. So obviously the first big board game was that Hero Quest that I mentioned before, that Games Workshop game. And then, yes, so those sort of more immersive hobby games are sort of what I gravitated towards. So games that came out in, again, gaming history, it's one of my biggest passions, if it's not tabletop gaming. I always love to look things through historical context. So in the late 2000s, early 2010s, there was a big boom in hobby gaming, and games started to sort of get more sprawling and stuff like that. So my reintroduction to the hobby as sort of more of a more strategic, sort of formal introduction is games like Zombicide and Dead of Winter, which are like zombie sprawling games like the one you mentioned, like Arkham Horror, Betrayal House on the Hill, those sort of games where it's like these big sort of strategy games that get laid out on a table. Obviously, a big one that was a favorite of mine for a little while was Of Mice and Mystics, which is like a sort of a strategy board game where you're all playing sort of anthropomorphic mice trying to escape like a house cat and stuff. Super fun game. It's a really cool game. It's a little bit complicated, but it's really cool. But that sort of stuff is like sort of where I really got into it, and I started doing, as I mentioned, sort of board game nights and stuff like that. And I could bring, unlike my collectible card game hobby, which I was doing on the weekends, which I was doing at game stores, I couldn't bring my friends along on that journey. But when this sort of 2010s sort of revive of, big box board games came out, that's when I was able to sort of bring other people along the same journey that I was having that fun of decision making, having that fun of like ground zero sort of play with them at the same time. To speak to the point we mentioned before about party games, so in hobby gaming, party games basically refer to much more lighthearted games. So I'm sure a lot of people would be familiar with Cards Against Humanity. Cards Against Humanity is considered a party game over a strategy game, or a hobby game or whatever.
My apologies for the not knowing that term. Thank you for informing me.
Absolutely no problem. And I'm honestly, my apologies for being like a but actually kind of guy.
No. This is very much a very welcome space for that, to be informative. I don't like that might save me down the line when, going to somebody's place and inviting people over for party games and they bring over, Cards Against Humanity or, Apples to Apples. And it's like, no, I want to play like Arkham Horror or something like that and try that out.
Yeah.
So what would you say is a big misconception about tabletop gaming by the wider world?
Okay, so for those who aren't into it, obviously the biggest issue is the fact that a lot of people still think that tabletop gaming is those mass market games from Toys R Us in 1987. A lot of people think that gaming begins with Operation Hungry Hungry Hippos and Monopoly, and basically ends with Pass the Pigs and all those other sort of Dutch Blitz and all that sort of stuff, right? When it isn't. Like it is, there's a whole industry, there's a whole market around it that is as immersive and deep as video gaming is, as any other sort of creative art is. So ultimately, like just these last couple of weekends, I went and played a party strategy game. I didn't play it. I went and demoed it. I flew out to Vancouver and demoed it for one of the companies that was creating it, AEG. And their new party game is called Ready Set Bet, and it's a board game. It's like a boxed board game, but it's a really fun experience. Basically, it's you're watching this horse race going on, and everybody else around the table is betting on the horses that are going to go, and the horses are being driven by people just rolling die. And there's no turns or anything like that. It's all just live action fun. It's one of my favorite games.
That's
and it's the kind of thing that I dubbed when I was sort of marketing it to the people at this convention, when I was sort of pitching it. It's a great Thanksgiving game. It's outside of things like Monopoly. It's fast paced. You crack open the box. One person plays the announcer, like the track announcer, and they just roll the die and just move horses, whatever the number of the horse is that gets rolled, they just move that horse. And meanwhile, while that's happening, people are watching somebody do that, and there is bets being placed on the horse, and then whoever's horse wins, they win the most money and stuff like that. You don't even need, other than the person who's playing that sort of GM sort of horse announcer racer role, other than them, nobody else at the table really needs to know the intricacies of the game. It can be a fun, lightweight party game. And I think that's the misconception. I think people walk into a gaming store and they think, oh, this is for, geeks. This is for Dungeons and Dragons geeks. This is for gaming geeks. You see these big Warhammer setups and stuff like that where it's sprawling and you've got to paint it yourself. That is certainly not the way. There is hundreds.
This Ma and Pa walking in just like, we're in nerd country.
Yeah, exactly. But it's getting better. Things like Targets and Walmarts and stuff are starting to sell sort of the hobby side of games. I know things like Wingspan and some of those more sort of mainstream hobby games are starting to trickle into those sort of places. Not that I think Wingspan is a good example of something we should be showing mass market hobby gaming to, but that's a tangent that I need to get off of. Ultimately, the biggest thing that I think people need to know is that tabletop gaming isn't just either things like Magic. It's not sweaty nerd stuff anymore, and it hasn't been for a long, long time. It is engagement. It is bar alcohol is probably the world's best social lubricant for a collective gathering of people.
Yeah. So I believe you kind of sidestepped, downplayed something there. If I heard you correctly, you've created a tabletop game?
So no, okay. So yes, I have, but not one that's been published. I've pitched to companies like Hasbro, Mattel, and stuff like that, but none of them have been successful yet. But what I was talking about before is I was asked to fly out to a convention and demo a game that is coming out from a company.
Oh, okay.
So basically
that's
I was
really
a sales rep
cool
for that weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's really awesome.
I've done it a couple of times. The most recent Gen Con, I was demoing games to content creators. So, if anybody's in the board game space, content people who make the YouTube videos and stuff like that, things like Dice Tower and stuff, we had a room specifically set up for them. And they would come in, the people who make the content, and learn about the games and then get a free copy of it and then go on their merry way.
Is that pretty common to kind of bring in it? And if I'm using incorrect terms, please do stop me, but to bring in a kind of a specialist, if you will, to help, get people interested or understanding or demo the game?
Well, you didn't use any. There's no but actually there. There's no need for any sort of
Yay!
incorrect terms. But no, I mean, obviously, different companies have different needs, right? Like, so, in the sense, in the most recent example, I was just somebody who's in the sphere of this gaming company. And they were like, well, we have an issue with one of our other people who can't make it to, a little inside information. Somebody who was planning to do it had COVID. Let's reach out to RANDS and he can go do it.
Oh, that's so cool.
So most of the time, board game companies are too small to employ people like that, but this is one of the bigger ones. So ultimately, usually what happens is at conventions, they'll have their own employees do those demos. But in this particular case, I benefited from it.
That's so awesome that they trusted you that much and that you were available to do that for them. It's such a great save, and it sounds like a rad experience, for you and for everybody involved to kind of, you get to kind of come in, be of help to them, but also get to experience and help people like learn and, get to enjoy this new game and, experience it so that like maybe it gets made or gets into the right hands.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is made. It was the day of the convention was its launch day. By John DeClaire,
right.
Again, Ready, Set, Bet. Everybody who's listening to this should go out and check it out. It's one of the best party games ever. You can literally drop it on a table at the end of Thanksgiving and boom, there you go. You're gonna have literally hours and hours of fun. It's really resonant. It's not alienating. Like I said, it's like based on old horse track, like sort of energy and vibes and stuff like that. So grandma at 90 years old versus, little Jimmy at 10 years old are going to be able to grok what's going on, understand what's going on. In my case, it was super advantageous for me because, again, I had previously lived in Vancouver, so I was completely familiar with the area. I got to go out and visit some friends that I hadn't seen, all on the dime of this game company. And the other thing that was super awesome as well is obviously it's a great network opportunity for me. So I have another convention going to PAX Unplugged in December, just to continue networking. I had a game, like I said, I've pitched to companies before and it hasn't gone anywhere. I took my prototype with me, of course, and I played it with some really high-profile game designers. Actually, the person who invented the genre of the game that played my game and gave me some feedback, and it's really given me some awesome food for thought.
Awesome! Oh, that's so cool. All right, before I get too wrapped up in this, gotta not forget the next kind of bit of the question here. Mm-hmm. Is there a favorite non-obvious aspect of tabletop gaming that you'd like to explain to people out there listening? That's something that you really get that other people, non-obvious aspect. Something that doesn't meet the eye at the, just the kind of cursory glance or the, outsider's one-time experiencing or viewing the process of tabletop gaming that really kind of gets your motor going.
I mean, so there is a ton of different facets to tabletop gaming. Like, we could talk about role-playing games versus, high X, 4X strategy board games, which are those sort of sprawling games you talked about before, even more so that probably you're even familiar with. It just goes over the entire table, or there's Warhammer or anything like that. So it's really hard to boil that down to a singularity. And I think we did an amazing job before explaining to, the sort of layman that these games are bigger than just those sort of, like I said, sweaty nerd games, and obviously people can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes there. Ultimately, I think something else beyond that is that games are so accessible nowadays. Don't be intimidated by the size of a box. There is a bunch of, if you just buy a game, you don't even have to read the rule book anymore. 90% of companies will have a playthrough video that you just teach you how to play on their website. And if they don't, content creators on YouTube will teach you how to play it literally in real time. So one of the barriers to entry, that makes tabletop gaming so much harder to get into the video gaming is video gaming has, in-game tutorials, right? It's something where it's like, oh, okay, so level 1, you'll learn how to jump, you'll learn how to throw your sword or whatever. In level 2, you'll learn how to jump, throw your sword, and then you'll learn how to climb or whatever. Tabletop gaming doesn't have that, and one of the barriers to entry is, oh shit, I've got to do homework before I can even play the game, which is reading the rule book or anything like that. Don't worry about that. There is a ton of accessible avenues as far as whether it's an official channel, whether it's a YouTube channel by some enthusiast. Every single tabletop game that you would be able to buy in a store has a how to play video online that is so simple. Don't let that precaution be a barrier to entry, because I know that's something a lot of people get stuck up on. I'm guilty of it sometimes. I'm like, oh, I would love to play this on game night, but I don't really want to have to wade through the setup in the game book. Hey, you know what? People are doing that work for you, and you can literally watch along, follow along. Hey, perhaps they suggest another game, or the YouTube algorithm suggests another game, and that helps the market and industry grow in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that up until recently, I think a friend of mine gave me the same recommendation, and it's true in so many different facets of the world. It is one of the best resources that we have at our tips, oddly enough, is YouTubing problems, and like the amount of people that have graciously, given back to the community by creating that walkthrough or that TLDR, however you want to, name it, so that you don't have to suffer as maybe they did or a friend did, and now like nobody needs to, because you can just look up this thing and have somebody, slowly, and the ability to pause and not be like rude and, stopping somebody because you don't get something. You can go back. It's so fantastic.
It's great. And most rule books nowadays will have a QR code on the back page or in the first page or whatever, that will be scannable, and it'll take you to the official how to play video. And a lot of the biggest games that will take, 6 or 7 hours usually have like a, basically that sort of video game aesthetic where it's like a tutorial setting where it's like, we'll just play this 30-minute version of this 3-hour game just to get how it plays.
That's so cool. I love that companies are doing that.
The other thing I will mention as well is leverage your local game stores. Like, local game stores love to make recommendations. If you're looking to start a game night or it's not something you've ever done, just walk in there and I'm sure they'll hand you something like a Ticket to Ride, something like like a Ready, Set, Bet even. Like, something that's super simple that can just get people into the world of it. Because game nights, they don't have to be those 1997 Toys R Us games, Monopoly and, Yahtzee and all that sort of stuff. There can be so much more depth to them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so perfect. All right, before we move on to our next segment, I'm going to try throwing you a curveball question that, it's trying it out for the first time, see if the shoe fits. Why do you think that you latched on so much and that tabletop gaming is your number one passion?
So, I mean, I have a lot of passions, obviously. We talked about many of them from filmmaking to Pokemon or anything like that. But tabletop gaming has been something, and it, like I said, was a eureka moment when it hit me. And everything from the social aspect of it and the idea that I can be playing and losing and still having a great time with the people around me. Even if, I don't know the people around me that well. Like, I'm a huge extrovert. And there's something about the puzzle solving and the strategy and stuff like that just hits the synapses in my brain to make them fire that I just don't get from video games. Like, I'm a very tactile person. I'm somebody who lives in the world, like, and hates to be an isolationist. Like I said, I'm an extreme extrovert. Being around other people is something that's really, really important to me. And not spending time in isolation, although as much as I love it, isn't something that I value a lot. Being able to connect with people through the way that these games help us connect, as I mentioned before, is a social lubricant, is something that's really, really important to me. And that can go from everything from just being a chess player. Like, I remember my grandfather teaching me how to play chess at like 6 years old, to being a 4X strategy player of a game like, well, obviously this isn't a 4X game, but like game like Scythe or Twilight Imperium, which are some of the heaviest sort of board games that you'll find in a general store. All of those I'm still having a good time playing, regardless of whether I'm winning, losing, stressed out. It's a different type of stressed out. Like gaming was invented to simulate things, right? Gaming was invented to simulate aspects of life. And that simulation helps me experience life in a way that I've never been able to before, and helps me engage with people in a way that might not be so easy had that not be there.
So good. All right, to change shoes, we're gonna move from the fantastic to the frustrating. Rands, what is your preposterous peeve?
Okay, so by comparison, this is quite a small subject and narrow one, but I feel like if you extrapolate it out, it says so much more about humanity than it does indeed. So you asked me about what my peeve is, and there is a lot of things that frustrate me. People, who use Siri aloud, like when they're around other people and stuff like that, piss the hell out of me. But what really frustrates me, what I think is an absolute issue in this world, and in fact, the audience can play along with this answer, because you can ask yourself, am I this kind of person that does this? And if the answer is yes, guess what? You probably need to look inside of yourself. But my preposterous peeve, and it is preposterous, but at the same time, I think it's very valid, are people who go to the grocery store, take a shopping cart, do their grocery shopping, check out, walk out to their car, take out all their groceries of their shopping cart, put them in their car, and then fucking just abandon the shopping cart as if it was some fucking tumbleweed. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, can we please, as a society, recognize that that isn't okay? Shopping carts in parking spaces are not okay. What does that say about a person who absolutely decides that their time is so valuable they can't take the 12 seconds it's going to take to return it to where the fucking carts belong after you took it in the first place? Absolutely ridiculous. I cannot say how much that bothers me in life at all. Like, those cars can sit out there in that car park. They can roll into another car. They're going to be out of use. You know, perhaps it's a really busy day. The trolley guy isn't going to be able to pick them all up. They're only sourcing from there. There is so many knock-on effects from this small, simple act that is so easy to remedy that I think if somebody does that, they really need to question who they are in society. And honestly, off on a tangent here, but maybe they're part of the problem.
And I mean, you didn't hit on the biggest thing. How does the trolley cart feel? It's out there all alone. It's not back with its friends. You left it stranded. It's in this parking spot. It doesn't know where to go. How's that cart supposed to feel?
Its wheels are askew. It's getting hit up by other cars. You know, it's getting smashed into. You know, there's people stealing them. There's teenagers riding in them. It isn't the inanimate object I wanted to be best friends with, but at the same time, I can still have sympathy for it.
Yeah, it deserves your attention, respect, and return.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if you're going to take something, and like I said, it's not just about the trolley cart, it's about consideration for other people around you. You know, if you're going to take it and use it, put it back.
Absolutely. So I think this will bring you a little bit of joy if you don't know this already. Do you know how the cart system works at supermarkets in the United Kingdom?
Is it like the sensor thing?
So this is a while ago. This was like all of 2005, but I would not be surprised if it continued to be this way. When you go to a shopping like service or whatever in the United Kingdom, to get a cart, you have to put in £1 to like unlock it from the other ones. Once you do, you can use it. Once you put it back, it gives you the £1 back. It doesn't cost you anything as long as you return it.
That's fantastic. And that's exactly what it should be. There should be a accountable deposit for that sort of thing here in, you know, North America or in Australia.
Yep.
I had no idea that was the case, but for sure that would be solving the problem that I'm talking about. And like I said, this isn't really an issue about the shopping cart. Like, the shopping cart is a manifestation of, are you a good person? Like, are you somebody who's worthy and able to function in a society, or are you so selfish and so blindsided by your own needs that you're not willing to do this little extra piece for the rest of us? You know, it's the same as littering. It's the same as anything. Like, the shopping cart in and of itself is a metaphor for the way that people
it's
can
emblematic
be
for the treat of society.
Absolutely.
When did you first notice this being an issue for you? Like, were you 5-year-old, you know, walking around asking for a candy bar and then seeing somebody not return it? Mom says, you know, that just like gives them a dirty look, or were you already like, that poor shopping cart, it doesn't deserve to be left alone? Like, when did this kind of matriculate into your bloodstream, this rage, this frustration, this indignation at this, you know, occurrence?
Well, I mean, probably when I started shopping for myself, like, realistically, I probably wasn't somebody who was looking at that sort of stuff when I was a kid, because, again, I was a selfish, moronic kid. But again, eventually, I grew up and I matured and I understood the differences between those things. And when I first moved out of home, I couldn't afford a shopping cart's worth of groceries. I was shopping, you know, hand basket to hand basket. But eventually, obviously, I started, using shopping carts and stuff like that, and that's where I noticed that in particular. But I think that the frustration really comes from, I mean, again, it's about consideration, right? Like, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, I took this, like, the worst thing I can ever see again, as somebody who worked retail for many years before this, is somebody who leaves their coffee cup in the middle of an aisle on a shelf display, or somebody who takes a piece of meat from the frozen section and then decides, oh, I don't want this T-bone steak, I'm going to leave it here amongst the cereal. Like, it's just, if you do something, have the respect for your peers and the people around you to put it back or undo it. So, I mean, forever, I guess, that has been a bother for me, whether it's kids not putting away the toys that they play with when they come to my house, whether it's, like they ride around in my bike or something like that, and they just drop it on the lawn and then go home. Like, these are just things, it's like, think about who you are.
The way you said that, it made it sound like 10-year-olds were coming over tomorrow and they're just leaving after playtime, and you had toys around. He's like, fucking kids.
Yeah, stepping on Lego blocks or something like that. Like, I don't even have kids. Why am I suffering this? No, let's not be ridiculous. Obviously, all the toys I currently own are sealed in their original packaging.
Clearly.
Absolutely. All my reaction figures and Beast Wars Transformers are all still in their original packaging. Kids couldn't fucking put their disgusting little hands on them.
Don't date me already more than you're going to.
Yeah.
Do you have a story or a time when this shone the brightest, when you just like couldn't help but like raise your hackles and let howl the, fury that was in your heart?
Yeah. I mean, specifically the trolley example. There has definitely been a time, it would have been in Vancouver, so not that long ago, but a good few years ago, where literally, I was taking a cart back, and then somebody got into their car, was getting into their car, and I slammed into the back of their car. You know how they accordion into each other? Mm-hmm. Slammed into the back of their car, didn't hit their car or anything like that. Slammed in the back of their car, and I said, I guess I'll take this, shall I? just being a jerk. Like, I mean, obviously this is the sort of thing that annoys me, and I do think it's a litmus test for how we're operating in society.
Oh, I'm sorry at your displeasure, but I cannot help myself but snarkingly snicker.
At what specifically?
And while I could and with that, we're gonna head to our second ad break, partially because I need to compose myself, but don't go anywhere, because when we get back, Rands is gonna enter the lightning round.
Ooh. Beast Wars.
Hey you. Yes, you. Yes, I'm talking to you. Have you ever wanted to record audio, or perhaps fiddle with recorded audio? Maybe even record audio of a fiddle and then fiddle with said audio. Well, now you can with Audacity. With all the run-of-the-mill bells and whistles, you'll be confusing yourself with a tech in no time. But won't that cost lots of money? Because with my snow-blowing habit, I can only afford it. Ain't gonna cost shit. Audacity is free and easy enough to use that even a snow-blowing son of a gun can use it too. And we're back. Rands, are you ready to enter lightning round?
The lightning round.
Absolutely, I wore rubber sole shoes for a reason.
Wise choice. All right, put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. Rands, is there a price for you to give up your passion forever?
Oh, yeah. There is a price. Yeah, it's got a lot of zeros after it, but there's a price.
Make the food or do the dishes?
Oh, for sure, make the food. I'm not scrubbing shit.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
100%. And that's the score I got as well.
Are you out of touch, or is it the children who are wrong?
As Principal Seymour Skinner would say, it is definitely the children who are wrong.
Would you rather have your inner monologue sound like Gilbert Gottfried or Fran Drescher?
Fucking Gilbert!
Would you rather read the cue cards while wearing the crown or live in a hovel and speak your mind?
Read the cue cards. Cue cards. I'll put those puppet strings on.
Do you create your own thoughts or do you just listen to them?
Definitely create.
You're having the best day of your life. What happens next? Another amazing thing or something terrible?
Another amazing thing.
Is professional wrestling cool or lame?
Like, we talking like WWE?
WWE, baby!
So not like Olympic wrestling?
No.
Okay. Is it cool or is it lame? Fuck. It's cool with time, but in the moment it's lame.
Stub your toe or make small talk with strangers?
Oh, fuck. I would... You could stub all of my toes and I'd still want to talk to 100 strangers. So definitely small talk.
Happiness or glory?
Holy shit. Well, I've had happiness, so I want glory.
Nick Cage, best or worst ever?
Oh, fucking somewhere in the middle. Like, if it's a binary choice,
Binary. Best? All right.
He's not bad.
Would you rather be an omniscient amnesiac or have a nat 20 charisma with halitosis?
Can we go to the video replay on that? What was that?
Would you rather be an omniscient amnesiac or have a nat 20 charisma with halitosis?
Omniscient amnesiac. Okay, so I am fully sentient about everything, but I forget everything?
You know everything about everything else. You don't know who you are. Or like people are.
Or I have
to
be...
the facts, but not the specifics, I guess.
And nat 20 as in natural 20 in D&D.
Yeah, you have like the nut charisma score.
Oh shit, like charisma for sure. Because charisma will get you anything you want. I can find everybody who knows everything else if I have charisma.
Very well troubleshot, sir. Very well troubleshot. Plane flight or road trip?
Oh shit. Like passionately road trip. Like obviously there's different examples for each one, but definitely road trip at my heart.
A day in or a night out?
Oh, a fucking night out for sure.
Salty or sweet?
What are you putting in my mouth? Salty.
Good, that's all I brought with me. Caramel or caramel?
As in enunciation?
Caramel or caramel?
All right, caramel.
A man of class, I see. Could you eat 37 of your favorite food for $5,000 in a 1 hour time limit?
Okonomiyaki? Fuck no. Those things are like fucking the size of a fucking wok. No, I can't eat that. That's crazy. What are you... I'd have to have 7 mouths. I'd have to have fucking 37 mouths. I can barely finish one in an hour.
Well, congratulations. You survived the lightning round. Now that you have said survived the lightning round. Yeah, those Rebel Shell suits doing work. What lightning round question would you like to ask me and in turn be asked of future guests?
So, my question is, and we are approaching Halloween at the time of recording. You may not be hearing it at this time, but my question is slightly Halloween themed. Would you rather meet your mortal demise by vicious werewolf attack or by a single zombie bite?
Vicious werewolf attack. It's going to be worse, but it's going to be over quickly, and I don't have to know that I'm going to be a burden to anybody that's unfortunately around me. You know, like if I get bit by a zombie, a loved one's going to have to kill me, I'm going to have to off myself, or I'm going to kill them. But like a vicious werewolf attack, you know, it's over. I'm dead, but it's over.
Right, but you don't get a chance to say goodbye to anybody.
Yeah, but I'm not a problem to anybody either. I don't know. For me, the idea of like being like, you know, putting other people in that spot where they have to kill me, that's such a burden. I mean, I like getting to say goodbye is nice, but like being a burden is like truly a nightmare. I don't know. I feel like I've been a burden all my life to like so many people that to do it on my, the last bit of my life is again a burden. It's like, damn it. I thought I escaped this when I was 5 and could, use the toilet by myself.
So to summarize, what you're saying is the single zombie bite is leaving the shopping cart in the fucking car park.
Yes,
the vicious
exactly.
The vicious werewolf attack is putting the fucking
Full
shopping cart
circle.
back.
Yeah, exactly. We're putting it back. It might be painful. It might be bloody. It might be messy, but we're putting it back.
Yeah, exactly. You're not inconveniencing anyone.
What about you?
I obviously, considering what I just said, I'm gonna have to go with werewolf. I hadn't actually thought about the answer to this question. I mean, honestly, I didn't really consider the fact that other people would have to deal with me. I think ultimately my answer would be single zombie bite because I get to spend more time with people. I'm an extrovert, whereas the werewolf attack, it's come and done. Like that's it.
Yeah.
But obviously,
I guess you don't have to technically put the burden on somebody else, but if you don't, you have to kill yourself, which is also like you just got bit by a zombie and now you have to off yourself. It's like, man, it's like 2 strikes. Like, what the hell?
Well, the thing about offing yourself, though, is it's always like there's that question of like, should I? Do I have anything to live for? Zombie bite takes that question out of the equation.
Yeah, but I mean, still having to jump off a cliff, shoot yourself, it's like, that's, whoa. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, just the act of doing it itself is like, ugh.
Look, if I can make any instance of self-pain look heroic, I'm going to fucking take it.
There's no through lines to draw from that, kids. We do not recommend violence against yourself.
Absolutely not. No, of course not. Definitely do not condone, we do condemn any sort of self-harm. Seek help. I'm sure Ike will link the support number for wherever you are in the description.
Yes. All right, man, as we come to a close here, anything you want to plug, shout outs you'd like to give, places you can find you or your places people can find you or your content?
So my name is RANDS, and I am very passionate about tabletop games, as we've learned throughout this episode, and specifically collectible games. So what I do is I chronicle the history of collectible games through a series of interview podcasts and tweets and stuff like that through a couple of social media accounts and posts and stuff. So primarily what I'm working on at the moment is I am currently just metamorphosizing my own content into a network, currently called the Booster Pack Network. So if you're interested in collectible games in any facet, not just Magic the Gathering, but any sort of collectible games, you can find us as the Booster Pack Network on YouTube. You search that up, and what I do is I speak to people who are involved in creating these types of games way back when or whenever, through one of my shows called Booster Pack Throwback, and they tell amazing stories of their time in the game industry. What else I also do is I also have conversational shows that I have called The Rare Slot, and on that show I talk about any number of trading card game related topics. For example, recently, just today at the time of this recording, but it would have been a little while ago when you're hearing this, I had an amazing conversation with an author called Ben Riggs. We discussed what happened to the role-playing game industry when collectible card games came out. They were both in the same space at the same time. Absolutely fantastic. Other episodes include me talking about what the environmental impact of trading card games are with somebody who's very wise on that matter. We also talk about a whole bunch of other things, like from a retailer's perspective, how did the pandemic hit? All these sort of things. Also, on my throwback show, I've just spoken most recently to the actual founder of Wizards of the Coast, Peter Atkinson, all about his time creating Magic the Gathering with Richard Garfield and helping it get to market. He also told amazing stories about how he was able to import the Pokemon trading card game and many other stories as well. It's a really fun, exciting show if you're into that slice of gaming history, and I fully recommend you check it out. We also have new shows starting on the channel. We've just had a new show start about trading card game design by my friend Jay Dodson. He's actually a amateur designer who's interested in getting into the world of trading card games and is creating a podcast where he sort of chronicles his journey through interviews with people who know what they're talking about. So he's also doing that, especially considering in the last few years we've seen Kickstarter trading card games come to life through through various streams of criticism, people have a lot of passion for this genre that we spoke about today, trading card games, collectible card games, and they want to give back by sharing their own ideas. And he sort of chronicles that journey. And in the future, we're going to have a show called, we don't have a name for it yet. Its currently working title is Cardboard Correspondence, and that's going to be a new show about everything that's happening in the trading card or collectible card game space at the time, especially as it relates to the big three trading card games. And that can all be found via the Booster Pack Network on YouTube. You could also find the boosterpacknetwork.com. That's going to have the podcast feed on it, but you can find that in any way you get your podcasts as well. You're also going to be able to find the Booster Pack Network via a TBPN content on any major social media platform.
Wow, that's so cool. I can't wait to check this out. All right, man. Do you have any friends? Yeah, of course. I appreciate you coming on here, and I appreciate you being so passionate about those things that you can't just, put it into one podcast. It needs to be at least 3, if not, more down the road. That's so beautiful, man. Love it. All right. Do you have any friends or family you'd like to nominate to come on the podcast so they too can suffer as you have today?
I certainly, first of all, wouldn't call what I've experienced currently as suffering. But we haven't got you at the door yet. I definitely have some people in mind. I don't think I'm going to name them on air, but it's certainly a couple of people who may be fellow podcasters and stuff like that I would be able to put forward on this particular instance.
Sweet. All right. Well, don't you worry, folks. I'm not going to give up on this source just yet. I'll talk to him off the air and we'll get these contacts. All right, cool, man. Well, thank you, Rand, for being my guest today. And a special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And thank you. Yes, you listening at home or wherever you found time to appreciate this. Time is the most precious commodity we have, and I appreciate you spending yours with us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, or just share with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry. We put out a new episode every Monday at midnight on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast. And a very special thanks are due to our patrons, Sabella Yellow. And if you'd like to join said illustrious ranks and have your name read aloud, just head on over to patreon.com/Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast. And remember, folks, why be classy when you can be sassy? If you could be on a date, why lift weights? And were it cool to be a fool, we all have jewels.